Federalism is what we have here in the United States. Federalism is where we as a population, have elected leaders to create and govern our country for what we feel is best for ourselves. We also we elect leaders that we know that we feel best represent what we as a person or as a whole will represent what we want as a majority. Our legislative branch, which is our Congress, it's a bicameral system. Both of them have to agree on the bill for it to be sent to the president to be signed to become a law. Well, this is where it differs from bureaucracy. We require our elected officials to create the bill and to create the law, make it become law, but our unelected officials, so our elected officials will nominate, or our president, who is elected, will nominate somebody for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court cannot be elected for reasons that's a whole different topic. Cannot be elected. They are nominated for what the presidents and past presidents feel will best support our country. What they do is they take the law and they decide whether or not it fits in with our Constitution. If it fits in with our Constitution, great, it becomes a law. There's no problems with it. We have to follow it as a whole. Well, we don't have to, but it's recommended that we do. If it's unconstitutional, they completely say, look, you got to rework it. It's gone. We're not going to even deal with it. So with federalism, all three of our branches work together. It's our checks and balances. They have to that's what our founders wanted. They wanted to make sure that all three branches had to agree for us to be governed as a whole. Now with bureaucracy is where the elected officials, they're just elected officials. Their laws and such come from their judicial system, or what we would call the judicial system. Their courts are the ones that create the laws and enforce them and that kind of thing. Their elected officials have no say. They're very similar. It's still a democracy. They still have a constitution. It's just the elected officials really aren't there to support their constituents. The unelected officials for the judges and such are the ones that will pass the laws and such. To give an example of a bureaucracy, I'm going to go with Israel. This is from James Grant in his article, The Rise of Bureaucracy. He states that Israel is one of the most extreme examples. Aaron Barak, he was the president of the Israeli Supreme Court from 1995 to 2006. He once said, "Nothing falls beyond the purview of judicial review. The world is filled with law. Everything and anything is justicable. Even the most contentious questions, such as who is a Jew, were questions for the court to answer. Barak made it clear that the main influence on his approach was the U.S. Supreme Court, the decisions of which were shining examples of constitutional thought and constitutional action." Okay, so the president of the Israeli Supreme Court, he is saying that it is up to the court. The court has to answer these questions. And he uses the United States Supreme Court as his foundation, as his belief of what is going to be a supreme judicial review. These judicial reviews has to be based constitutionally. Everything has to come from the Constitution. He wants it to be, he says you can't do things, there is laws out there that you have to follow, and it's up to our countries to make sure that there is judicial review in everything that happens. Grant continues with saying, or giving an example of how bureaucracy actually denies their citizens their democratic right to participate in political decision making or decision making process. He gives the example of parliamentary systems such as Britain. They are firmly based on the belief that rights-based judicial review has a price not worth paying. Apparently, Britain is one of the few remaining countries that lack a written or codified constitution. He's saying it's not that Britain doesn't take they don't have a constitution or that they don't take their rights seriously, but their constitution is to some extent is flexible, and that the protection of human rights is contingent on the democratic will of Parliament. A Bill of Rights is merely, in the words of a constitutional specialist, quote, the statement of a political conflict pretending to be a resolution of it, unquote. So he says rights as political claims must compete with other political claims and must fight the political fight, a conflict that is not resolved by using rights as trumps. So he's saying by letting the judiciary handle such decisions, bureaucracy actually denies its citizens their democratic right to fight for their democratic process, decision makings. They're not allowed. I mean, the people have a constitution. They have rights. It has to have, a Bill of Rights like we have. But human rights with like Britain and their bureaucracy, it's a bureaucracy, whereas their people really don't have a say in the political decision-making process. They can't vote on things, vote on issues and stuff like that like we do. Whereas, within our democracy and within our federalism, we are able to, within our states, so our countries, within our states, within the countries, or their provinces or territories or whatever they call them in certain countries, we actually, I know we vote on things in Texas all the time. I mean, there is stuff on the ballot every March and every November for us. And so we have to read into things. And it's not just within our state government, but our local governments as well. We have a say in those decision-making processes. But what Grant is saying is that with bureaucracy, people within those democratic countries that have a bureaucracy, they actually don't get to vote on certain laws that they will have to abide by. Their courts just pass the laws and say this is what you have to do. So it's up to the will and up to the view of who's been non-elected, a judge who's been non-elected into a position. This really kind of reminds me of the monopolies and stuff like that in our late 1800s and early 1900s, that kind of thing, with Rockefeller and Carnegie and Vanderbilt and, the men who built America. It really reminds me of this time period where William McKinley is elected president, but it's like he's been put into office. This comes before, of course, naturally, this is before the vice president and the president ran on the same ticket. This is where our president runs on a ticket and our vice president runs on another ticket, and you elect both of them. You don't elect them together. You elect one separately and what have you. And so William McKinley is elected president. Teddy Roosevelt is elected vice president. But it's said that those men who built America are captains of industry, robber barons, whatever you want to call them. They are the men who actually put him into office. They put people into office. It's kind of like you scratch my back, I scratch your back type of thing. These men pay. They didn't put McKinley himself. They put people into office that have high influences and such to help put McKinley into office, hoping that these men that are in office that are making decisions and making laws and passing bills into laws and all that fun stuff, that they will pass laws that will benefit these rich men. Well, when McKinley dies suddenly, they can't control Roosevelt. Roosevelt comes in, with his trust busters, and he kills our monopolies and our trust and stuff like that. And so that really kind of reminds me of this, the bureaucracy kind of reminds me of that type of system, the corrupt system. So they elect people, the constituents or the democratic citizens elect people. Those people then nominate or put people into office that are actually going to make the laws and stuff like that. And it's kind of, to me as a historian, I see the similarities where these people give the money to these people to push them to be elected, so these elected officials can make our laws in our country. And so we start to see that to happen, but it's happening on a bigger scale, and it's happening in present day in other parts of the world. So let's look at how these two, federalism and bureaucracy, actually influence, or how they're influenced by biblical principles and Judeo-Christian worldviews. So personally, to me, federalism is supposed to give people their rights. We have our Bill of Rights, which is our fundamental rights as a United States, or as a United States citizen. That's a key word I use with my students. United States citizen. You are entitled to these rights as a United States citizen. Why are you, this to me is, your basic fundamental rights as a citizen. But what are your human rights? Yeah, we use the term life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We use that term. We use it very loosely within our country, I've noticed in the last couple of decades. But federalism chooses, as it looks, to give its people their basic rights. We can look at our First Amendment. The freedom of religion, the freedom of the press, the freedom of assembly, the freedom, I'm missing one, but you're allowed to use your freedom of speech, your freedom to express yourself. But what about your basic survival rights? Like, are you guaranteed a home? Are you guaranteed anything to survive? You're not guaranteed that by our Constitution. Our Constitution guarantees you your political rights, and that if you say something, you have the freedom to say something, but you might want to watch how you say it. There are consequences for some things that you do. But when it comes to bureaucracy, it's like they don't have a Bill of Rights. Like, they have a Constitution, but it's, as Grant pointed out, it's kind of flexible. And so your basic human rights or your political rights, morally, to me, it seems wrong, because you don't have those rights. You can't participate in the decision-making process. You are just left to just pray that the people that you elected have nominated or put somebody in office that's going to do something or pass a law that's going to benefit you. So to me, morally, it seems wrong. Morally, there's a lot wrong with political systems. But morally, and what I've learned as a Christian and what I've been taught, that's not how things should go down. We are, as children of God, we are supposed to help each other. We're supposed to spread the word. We're supposed to, if you see someone struggling, you're supposed to help them. That kind of thing. You're supposed to be a giver. You're supposed to help. And as you do that, you're going to spread the word of God. But if you're continually doing something to harm people, I don't see the word of God getting published, or getting published is not the correct term, but getting out there, because people aren't going to believe in you. But Christianity is supposed to be about helping others. We are supposed to be that type of people. And if we are not doing that in our political systems, then we are doing our states and our countries a disservice.